All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on this June 10th. All right, so we are, look at this. We are a few weeks away from being halfway through the year. Today, we are very fortunate, okay, to have with us a dynamite agent, mostly, I would say, all commercial, Ofir Barashy. Ofir, welcome to the call. And you got to hit *6 on your phone so we can hear you. Sorry, I forgot to mention that to you. *6 will unmute you.
Ah, there we go.
There you go. All right, my man. Well, tell us a little about yourself, how long you've been doing this, all that good stuff, please.
Sure. So my name's Ofir Barashy. I run the Barashy Group out of the Summerlin, Berkshire Hathaway office. Been in the commercial real estate space now for almost 4 years, and feels like a lifetime, not because of the 4 years, but because my partner, Sean, who's also my dad, has been in the business for almost 30. So it's been, around my family since I was a kid. I would go and, as Sean would go and take care of properties, either for himself if he owned them or for, other property owners. We'd go on the roofs and fix the AC units. We'd patch it up. We'd, fix the toilets and the sinks. I mean, we pretty much did all the work that you'd typically hire out. That was just his mentality, and it's really carried over to me, especially as I'm renovating my house now. So, been in commercial real estate the entire time. That's my full focus. I don't touch residential. I prefer to let the great agents of Berkshire Hathaway handle that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So give an idea what you do, like for in a day of a life of a commercial broker. What you do: leases, you do sales, you do all kinds of good stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah. So, a good agent, and that's not always me. It just depends on the day. But a good agent will spend a lot of their time prospecting. And so they're hitting the phones, they're doing email blasts, they're sending out newsletters. They're trying to connect with as many property owners as possible. Now that's more my strategy, because I prefer to work on the landlord side, on the owner side, on the listing side. And so, most of my time, if I have it, is spent trying to reach out to new people and see if I can help them in any way. But other than that, the focus is either leasing, it's sales, that could be owner-user sales, it could be investment sales, but it's heavily focused on brokerage services. And the other is just relationship services. Like if you need help with something, I'm there to help you, whether it's connecting you with another vendor, talking through a specific scenario. It doesn't have to make me money. It just has to make people happy. So it's very much a relationship business. Not every single instance is a transaction.
Okay. So much like, residential real estate agents, you have to get on the phones, talk to people, have a sphere, do all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and then when you say email blasts and so forth, are you talking about to property owners that own commercial? Like, is that just, is it multifamilies? Is it businesses, both, all of the above?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, what it depends on is the specific scenario that you're trying to achieve, the goal that you're trying to achieve. So in some cases, when I'm representing landlords and I have a property that I'm trying to sell, then I email blast to buyers, primarily to buyers, but sometimes to just anyone and everyone in my database. So it's super important that your focus isn't just on talking to people, but on asking for their information, asking for their emails, their phone numbers, so that you can connect them later on. The goal of a broker is to put 2 and 2 together. That's your goal. You're supposed to connect buyers and sellers, tenants and landlords. And so it's just important that you have the relationships with everyone, so that when you find the right opportunity for the right person, it's like matchmaking. You just, put them together, and hopefully it's a match made in heaven. So on my end, I focus a lot on medical, healthcare real estate. And so I'm trying to talk to doctors, or I'm trying to talk to, MOB investors, medical office building investors, Healthcare is a very unique type of property because it's office, but the main difference between medical office and professional office is the plumbing and the sewage. That's really the main difference. There are others, but if you boil it down, that's really the big difference. And so specializing in medical is a little bit different than focusing on professional.
Right. And when you say medical, so when you find them something, they probably are there for quite a while, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're getting into the stability of the asset class, medical has been shown to be a very stable asset class through, even COVID.
Right.
To your point, it depends on the use, right? It always depends on the use. It also depends on the tenant. Maybe the tenant has a new business that they're trying out, so they're a little scared to sign a longer term lease. But in general, if they're successful, they stick around for a long period of time.
Right. All right, cool. Just to give them an idea, Ofir, so you get on the phone because, they make calls, asking people, have you thought about selling your property, or you ever thought about buying a property, or we just sold a home in your neighborhood, or I'm having an open house. Sure. So in your business, what kind of calls do you make to property owners? What do they consist of?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. Personally, I try not to sell. I think the best salespeople don't sell at all. Right. My goal when I'm making a call is just to get to know the person on the other side and see if they're willing to have a conversation with me. A lot of times the people, they don't have time. They're not willing to have a conversation. I'm not talking about the weather. Typically I'm asking, good targeted questions like who's managing your property, and right. What's your plan? What are you looking to do? What are you hoping to accomplish? Many times when you're talking to the mom and pop building owners, which tend to be within a certain range of, property value, which is kind of the bread and butter for who I like to work with, many of them don't have the experience that I do. They don't know how to manage the property as well as I may know how to manage the property. And I don't mean that from a property management standpoint, like what my good friend Chris McGarry does, but I mean that from how do I set myself up for success? How do I optimize the asset? How do I get the most out of it and spend the least on it? So those are kind of the areas that are the most valuable, in my opinion, because those are ways that I can help you even if your strategy is to hold. Because even if your strategy is holding, which 99% of the people will say one way or another, whether they intend to or not on the phone, you can still help them. You can still, okay, perfect, no problem. Thank you for letting me know that sales is not in the question and you don't need any help with leasing. But if you're going to just hold, it's probably better to actively hold than to passively hold. And those are two very different strategies. We have to still look at your property's insides, let's say, and understand how they are, because even if you hold, time doesn't. And, with time, things may happen, wear and tear, or even just, machine issues, equipment issues. And so we want to kind of go in there and do our due diligence and analyze everything for you to provide you with a property snapshot, right? A point in time today that shows, hey, this is the health of your overall property. Just like you would go to a doctor for a checkup, same kind of thing I try to pitch my clients about their properties. Is you got to check your property up from time to time. It's your biggest investment, most likely, your biggest place where your money lies. And so you should be taking the best care of it.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, I remember I did a few commercial in my state where I did most of my selling. One license covered everything. All right, you'd have to do specialized training. Yeah. So I sold like a 12 unit with a convenience store in it for, this was years ago, but it was, I remember two things. It was way more in depth, all the books, everything had to be analyzed of the store, blah, blah. And the sale price was higher. The time was longer, but the commission was nice. I remember that. I did a couple of leases too, commercial leases, but it's a whole different game. So my question to you is, because you hear a lot of things with this new how can I say this? With this new way of doing business, people working at home sometimes, people going into the office sometimes, kind of a split schedule situation. How is that affecting the commercial business?
I think you can look at it from two different ways, right? Your question could be geared towards how is that impacting the agents and how is that impacting the property owners?
Right.
Let's talk to the property owners because I'm assuming that was more of your intention. So there are, a multitude of asset classes, and I won't, go into depth on each one, but let's talk through a few. So there's office, retail, industrial, multifamily, and let's stay there because that's kind of the big ones. The main one that took a big hit and that continues to take a big hit is office, but more specifically, because it's not just it's wrong to say that office in general is hurting. It is, but it depends on the area. Most of the cases where office is hurting is in urban areas, in the urban core. In suburban areas, office isn't doing as bad as you would expect. It's true. People still are not coming to the office. Hybrid work is very normalized. And in some cases, remote work is normalized. But I think the office property owners that are seeing vacancy are having a tougher time dealing with it because you have to find creative ways to bring people to the office now. It's not as easy as saying, well, you got to come in. That's the deal. The COVID landscape changed everything. And so it's not necessarily just, landlords that are having the trouble, but the businesses are having the trouble too. And so you have to really be creative. You have to work with the landlord. You have to work with the tenant to find creative ways to bring people back to your property. It's not very easy to convert properties over to different uses. But the easiest one, if I were to guess, it would be from professional office to medical office. But that still takes a very heavy lift depending on how the building is designed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And from an agent standpoint, Rick, I would say, I think that's tough too. I think now that it's normalized to be at home, a lot of agents work from home. I look around the office sometimes and there's nobody here. It's a ghost town. But for me personally, I know that I can't be successful at home. I have a very hard time
I'm the same way.
Staying focused and disciplined at home. And I think that that's normal and natural because home is supposed to be the place where you relax, not the place where you work. And so I think it's really important that especially agents that are listening to this and just people in general who are working, you really want to make sure that you separate where you work, where you sleep, where you watch TV, have designated areas for those things so that when you're in those spaces, your intention is set on the purpose of that place, So
I think that'll start making a resurgence again because I think we're going to start heading back towards that because I agree with you 100%. From a mindset standpoint alone, you should have separation of where you work versus where you live. Although some people are just good at it. I personally am not. I don't think it's something you're supposed to be good at. I think that, you're supposed to separate the two. Which you mentioned changes of use. Just for yucks, I've just heard rumors that some of this over some of these offices that, especially in big cities and so forth, they might be converting some of them to residential. Is any of that true?
I'm sure there are cases where that is, but that would be a very, very challenging, difficult, and expensive lift. To convert over, let's say, an office building to a multifamily building, you have to think that every single room has to have a bathroom. And so the plumbing has to be there across the board. It has to have sewage, because the bathroom has a sink and it has a toilet, and just a drain in general for both of them. So it's a very, very, very expensive lift to do that. You're gutting the building, altogether. And so I don't know. In some cases, it might not be worth it at all to do something like that. It might be more worth it to demo the building and build it back up. I'm not so familiar with the construction side of things to have an answer for it. But it's a very, very few and far between that can afford to do something like that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
It's a very, very long-term strategy goal, in my opinion.
All right, cool. All right. Well, obviously you're very successful. That's why we have you on here, and everything that you're saying makes perfect sense. And like you said, your father is a rock star. He's been doing this a long time. So give them, okay, so I want to be successful, and, I mean, business is business. There are things that work in commercial, that work in residential, that work in, selling widgets, that work in everything. What do you think? Tell them like your top 3 things. In order to be successful in this business, what are the 3 things you have to focus on the most?
Oh, man. I mean, I think that the most important thing, and I don't think that this is a lesson here, I think it's a lesson in general, and I think it's a very challenging lesson, but you have to stay consistent. You have to get your reps in. You have to go to the gym every day. You have to, go to sleep at the same time. You got to wake up at the same time. Consistency builds discipline, and discipline really is what gets you far in this business, is just being able to do the work inside and out. And I think that's really hard because people don't want to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. But that's the nature of this business. And so I think in a lot of things, that's probably the best lesson that I can offer. It's probably the hardest lesson, in my opinion, to practice, because there's so many things that can derail you from that. Even in a vacuum, you probably would have a hard time staying consistent. But that would be the biggest thing. And for me, the 2 other pieces that I learned before coming into real estate that I've taken into this business is just your communication skills are crucial. You have to be able to communicate effectively and efficiently, and you have to understand the perception around you. So you have to know that how are you being viewed? How is the customer viewing you? How is the customer supposed to be viewed? I mean, perception is I think it's something that people don't really talk about, but it's important to have that awareness and know what effect you're having on people. Aside from just what you're communicating, it's what's the overall effect. Right.
I love that. Okay, so consistency, communication skill. Believe me, I talk a lot about communication skills. I think consistency also. These 2 are both extremely important to be successful in this business and in life, I think.
Yeah, definitely. In any relationship, you have to communicate to have successful relationships. You can't just not.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. And what would number 3 be?
Oh, well, I would have said that perception is that thing. It's just being perceptive. It's being aware. It's not enough to just be knowledgeable about the industry, but really understanding what your customer is looking to do. You have to go beyond the word sometimes. You have to understand the intention. And I think that's a very difficult skill to master, because it requires, well, maybe this is probably the better 3rd one, Rick, is just you have to listen. You have to, a lot of people talk and they don't actually listen. And I think that's the biggest problem, especially when you're making phone calls. It's really difficult, I think, to listen, because when you first start a phone call, you're just trying to get out as much as you can, right? Like, my name is Ofir. This is who I am. This is where I work. This is what I do. But it's really, really important to get yourself to that point, especially with the cold call, but with any kind of conversation, to just, shut up and listen. Just ask the question and don't follow up with anything else. Just listen to what they have to say. Stay silent. Because a lot of times your customer will tell you exactly what they want, maybe not in the words that you'd expect, but in the intention. So you have to really be listening.
You do. And that's such a great way to put it, too. Ask the question and then don't give them a multiple choice answer like some people do. Well, because it could be this. And just listen to how they say it. Because sometimes even when you ask a question, the client takes it a different way and takes you down a road that you weren't even considering. You're like, oh, okay. Right? So, and you said the key words, ask the question, shut up, don't give them, and listen, and repeat and approve, and dig deeper when necessary. Totally agree with that 100%. And that's a skill.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much a skill. Very much because it requires you to. It requires. What's the best word to use this? Like you have to turn it on. You know, it's not. In some cases, it's natural, right? But for most people, it's not natural just to sit there and listen. You have to like hold yourself back. I think that's really the skill, and then you have to be, you know, not focusing on the next question that you're going to ask, but just intently listening to what they're saying, and more importantly, what they mean. And sometimes those two things don't align.
Right. Yeah. And not be thinking about what to say next to, like you said, I mean, or the next, because it's very obvious. When you can tell when you're talking to somebody who's not really listening, they're just thinking about what they're going to say once you've stopped talking. It's really frustrating, I think.
Yeah, especially for a customer who's giving you their time, and they feel like you're not actually listening. You know, a lot of times in any kind of business, when you're dealing with a customer, I think most of the time they want you to understand them. Like they want you to know what their goals are, what they're looking to do, because they want help. They just don't want to ask for it, or they don't feel like they should be asking for it. And so, you know, your job is to try to help them as best you can, and the only way to do that is by listening, like truly listening, and then communicating effectively from there. So I think, those are
totally agree.
Those are pretty big lessons.
Totally agree. It's something that I'll be honest, I was not good at it first. I was energetic, enthusiastic, but tried to do most of the talking, which I thought was selling back then, and I realized today it's not. It's asking questions, listening, and delivering what they want. Right?
Yep.
If possible, some people have unreal expectations.
Sure. Yeah, that's challenging, because I think that goes back to your communication skills, right? Is just in that case, listening is good, but at some point your expertise has to come in play as well, and you have to be able to say, I wouldn't recommend that, or I would recommend this instead, or have you thought about X, Y, Z? Because you have to also, your role isn't just do the job, listen to what they say, customer's always right. That's not why they have you. You're an advisor. So your goal is to advise them. You're supposed to be putting them on the best path forward for them, whether they know it or not. A lot of times you can't force them to do anything, right? Like, we don't have control over what they're going to do, but your job should be try to help them as best as they can. And sometimes, I think a lot of times that can lead you down a rabbit hole, or it can lead you down a path that's going to take a lot longer, and that means that maybe you're not going to make money faster. You're not going to get your commission sooner. But in the long run, it's always worth it. And if we got a minute, I'll give an example.
Go ahead.
So
absolutely, we do.
Imagine working on the landlord side, and let's say a tenant comes to you, and let's say even they look strong. They're strong financially. They seem like a good fit. But as you're getting to know the individual, they're a very, very difficult person to deal with. They complain all the time. They're very negative. They're, crossing out everything in the lease agreement or in the LOI, and they're making it really challenging to move forward. They have a lot of the money. They could do it. They're going to pay the rent. That's fine. But the person might be too difficult to deal with. Sometimes you have to kind of, remember that this is a people business first. And so in those instances, ultimately it's the landlord's decision. You don't make any decisions, but you want to protect your client. And so, you have to sometimes say, hey, this is the situation. I just want to explain how the conversations have gone with this individual. Here's everything in writing, ideally, right? And so, you got to let them make that decision. A lot of times it's going to cause a lot more headache for them when the lease is signed already and the tenant's a pain than it will be to not sign that tenant and just wait a little bit longer to see if you can find something better.
Yep. Totally agree. Same thing in real estate. And if you're talking to enough people and filling the pipeline enough, you can really choose who you work with, right?
That's ideal.
That's ideal. Well, awesome, my man. I just want to say, Ofir, thank you very much for taking your time out today. This was completely awesome. It was good mixing it up with somebody like yourself. Had Jack on a couple of weeks ago, too, and I've also had Chris. You mentioned Chris McGarry. It's good to mix in our commercial dudes and dudettes as well. I thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking your time out today, my man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I think I'll be doing something like this again tomorrow in person, I believe, here at the office, in the Summerlin office. So if you're around, swing by.
All right, awesome. You got it.
Thanks,
Ofir.
you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
All right, bye-bye now.